Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Thane and I'm the founder of No CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guests today are Bill Thane, go-to-market lead at Canidium, a system integrator focused on the SAP CPQ solution that is based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Garth Hoff, director of pre-sales consulting at Pricefx. Canidium and Pricefx recently announced a partnership, and so I wanted to talk to them to learn more about why they decided to partner. Welcome, Bill and Garth, to the CPQ podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Frank.
Very excited to have you both, and let's maybe start with Bill. Please tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself, what you do at Canidium, and what you did before you joined Canidium.
Sure. So, as you said in your introduction, I'm the go-to-market lead for Configure Price and Quote for Canidium. So, as the go-to-market lead, I'm not only responsible for generating new CPQ implementation and managed services business, but also being the main contact for the SAP CX contacts, Pricefx team, as well as some of our trusted system integration partners such as IBM. Prior to that, I was the lead CPQ consultant for Canidium, doing implementations for approximately 3.5 years. And then I spent almost 5 years prior to that as a pre-sales engineer at a CPQ company, FPX, which was actually when I first met you, Frank. And then I did some Salesforce CRM consulting work as well. How did I get to CPQ? I was in sales for many years, and I worked with a variety of quoting tools and systems and took that deep knowledge of the sales process and the quoting process and brought that to Configure Price and Quote as a solution.
Excellent. And then the same question to Garth. Garth, what did you do before you joined Pricefx, and what do you do at Pricefx?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. So, I've been a leader in the pre-sales team or solutions consulting team at Pricefx for about 4 years now. But I've been in the SaaS software and e-commerce space, since the early 2000s. I've had a couple different titles at Pricefx, but at the end of the day, what I do is I just give a lot of demos. It's the simple way to say it. It's a slightly less glamorous way to talk about it, but that's the truth. So I spend quite a lot of time with customers and prospects from around the world. I spent earlier in my career a lot of time in the travel and e-commerce space at Continental Airlines and Orbitz.com. It's interesting how much time changes, right, in technology. So now you have those are, not United Airlines and Expedia. Those other companies technically don't exist as such. So I did a lot of work there in product management and in product marketing roles. But that's what really bridged me over into this general CPQ or, pricing space. So I started working in the pricing management and optimization space at Pros a number of years ago, where I worked both on the sort of the airline revenue management, but also on their nascent kind of CPQ business. So after I went through the IPO with them, I left that company and I went out into the practitioner space. I was a director of pricing strategy for 7 or 8 years for two different companies. So I had the great experience of being able to be a user and consumer and evaluator of these different kinds of CPQ and pricing tools. But then I got lured back into the software side of the house, which is always a lot of fun to be in at Pricefx when they really started taking the US market by storm probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Excellent. So both of you have tons of experience. I'm very excited to have you. But before we talk about the partnership between Canidium and Pricefx, let me ask a question I ask everyone who's coming on the CPQ podcast is, what do you do when you don't work? And let's start with Bill.
My wife and I moved to Tampa, Florida right before COVID-19 hit. So we've been busy catching up, exploring the area. Once things get a little bit easier, my wife and I, who is a Spanish citizen as well as a U.S. citizen, we tend to travel to Spain a couple of times a year. Her family's from the Canary Islands. It's not a place that most Americans get to, but it's very popular, certainly with the European population. So one thing that we're currently engaged in is we lost one of our beloved dogs to cancer recently, and we realized the tremendous cost of trying to get cures for that disease. So we worked with a lot of the rehabilitation and a lot of the cancer specialists in the area. So we've started our own nonprofit foundation to help families that can't really pay that expense, to try to raise some money to help them when they're in that horrible situation. So that's what we've been working on. It's a lot of work because there's a lot of paperwork and everything involved in starting a nonprofit foundation, but that's what we kind of do in our spare time now.
Wow, that's a very good cause. So, and I'm sure we will have the information about that in the show notes for that one, for anyone who's interested in contributing to that. But let's also ask the same question to Garth, right? What do you like to do when you don't work?
Yeah, to be honest, I probably spend most of my time, running after my 3 kids. They're in all different kinds of activities, from junior ROTC to orchestras and athletic groups and all of that. But when I get some spare time, I like to go hiking. I like to go out to the archery range that's close by here. But there's also several community organizations that I like to try and support and help out these kinds of underserved communities. So there's a group that focuses on workforce training for young mothers that I've worked with and supported over the years. Actually, one of the, I wish we had time to even go into more depth on it. I got to spend last Friday in prison. The good news, it wasn't for anything bad that I did. I had the chance to work with an organization that did some outreach in the Ferguson unit at the Huntsville Penitentiary here in the Houston area. So that was a pretty neat and rewarding experience to get to do some of those things. So it's a little bit of everything from family and community things that keep us busy here.
Wow, very cool. So you both do a lot of good in your spare time. That's exciting. I think I didn't have that so far, that both guests were doing something as honorable as that. And if we need to have something in the show notes as well, let me know. We will do that. But let me first go ahead so before we talk about the partnership announcement of Pricefx and Canidium and what it means, Bill, can you please tell us what CPQ services Canidium offers?
Sure. So we offer both implementation services on CPQ, and we're working with Pricefx to be able to have implementation engineers there. And then an important part of our practice is the managed service space, because in the past, Calidus Cloud, which now has become SAP CPQ, didn't tend to have a partner organization around the CPQ practice. We, however, had a couple of people that were very knowledgeable in that area. So we have been doing managed services for prior to that Calidus CPQ, and we do it now for SAP. And that's a big part of our practice right now. Something that we find is a great place for our new people to kind of shadow and learn, as well as to improve the performance and improve the functionality of the current systems that people have.
And then one thing I want to ask also, I think Canidium covers SPM as well as CPQ business. And I just wanted to understand how important is the CPQ business for you compared to the SPM business?
It is very important because we touch a lot with the CPQ practice, we touch not only the ERP or the back end processes, but certainly, the customer experience processes. The commission program, which has been around, longer than the CPQ program, it was what Canidium started with. They just recently moved from the CX space and SAP to the SuccessFactors space. But when we look at it, we say we're the bridge between that back-end system and, the commerce systems, the commerce cloud, the sales cloud, the service cloud. So it's very important at Canidium because we touch that area that commissions does touch, because they generally integrate into the CRM system as well as the financial systems. And that also, works into our strategy with Pricefx, because, that's the point we like to be in, where we are touching a lot of the different areas, functional areas of these businesses and looking to help improve their processes.
And what would you say is your target audience, target customer size, and target geography?
Yeah, it's depending on who we're working with. I think that traditionally people look at CPQ as a product that lends itself to manufacturing, and certainly that is one of the verticals we deal with. But we deal with an awful lot of sales and distribution, telecommunications, software companies, service companies. So it's kind of a broad range. And if we were targeting just directly, oftentimes we're targeting mid-market, which to us is a $500 million to approximately $5 billion company. However, we work with some fairly large global integrators such as IBM, as I mentioned before, and NTT Data. So we often are working as one of their subcontractors, key subcontractors on the SAP CPQ space, dealing with Fortune 50 companies all the time. So it depends on who's the primary integrator, whether it's Canidium or it's one of our global integrators that we work with.
And the last question before I get to Garth is also, tell us a little bit more about your partnership with SAP.
So the partnership with SAP has been, since they acquired Callidus, has been quite strong. It's almost 4 years now since that acquisition took place. We've actually been the CX Partner of the Year in the past with them. And just recently in 2020, we won an award, Litmus Award, for our in-house training program from SAP. We have a very strong partnership with the SuccessFactors group. We have a very strong partnership with the CX group. So they are very supportive of us. Oftentimes we will work directly with them. We ensure that they're always involved in any engagement that we're in, because you need to close the loop. Even if we're working with a large integrator, we always make sure SAP has a seat at the table, because it's a highly technical solution that we're dealing with, and oftentimes you need that technical support. So we think it's a very strong relationship, and I believe if you talk to SAP, they would believe the same.
Excellent. Then let's ask Garth. Also, please tell us a little bit more about the products and services that Pricefx offers.
Yeah, sure. I think philosophically, I'll hit some of the same notes that you just talked about on the last question as well, on the Canidium point there. But at Pricefx, we talk about how we help our customers around kind of 3 key areas around plan, price, and profit. But what this really means is that we help B2B and B2C companies globally, manage and execute all of the elements across the waterfall. The price waterfall maybe isn't a concept that everybody listening to this is familiar with, but just think of this as sort of an analogy for your P&L statement or your profit and loss statement. So thinking about how you're going from price setting to optimization and contracts, building up to what your customer pricing would be in the marketplace, to on-invoice discounting, things like promotions, spas, special pricing agreements, and similar things like that, to the next kind of phase in the waterfall, your off-invoice elements like rebates with accruals and payouts, and even claims or claim backs if needed. So, we have customers around the world. Pricefx, our largest concentration of employees is actually in Prague in the Czech Republic. But we're actually a very globally diverse organization, especially in our customer mix. So that goes across Europe, North America, into Mexico and Latin America, and into Australasia as well.
Excellent. So you already mentioned a little bit the geography there. Can you tell us also a little bit about the typical target audience that you have and your target customer size?
Yeah, again, it really is quite diverse. So we do reach customers, some that are quite small, into the $100 million revenue range, and even smaller. But the majority of our customer base is in this larger kind of multi-billion-dollar category. Large customer segment. But we also have a really nice and really aggressively growing large enterprise range as well of these kinds of large. If I were in sales, I'd be calling them the whales. So by example, by categories, whether it's manufacturing, discrete and process manufacturing, distribution, services, and a variety of other areas, automotive companies like Michelin or Bosch. I hope you appreciate my European pronunciation of Michelin.
That's fine. No, but Pricefx also has a CPQ solution, right? So how important is that CPQ solution for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because whenever somebody says, hey, I'm looking for a CPQ solution, the first thing I always have to ask them is, well, what do you mean by CPQ? Because in fact, I think it means different things to different people. So sometimes it turns out that CPQ is mental shorthand for a pricing or price optimization solution. But sometimes it's actually somebody who really needs a complex configured product engine. And so I think in the marketplace I've found is not everybody really even quite 100% understands what CPQ is, and it means different things. It usually requires some additional, drill down to understand what their focus is. So when I think of Pricefx, we sometimes like to say we put the P in CPQ. And I think that's where some of this discussion is headed, right? So, Pricefx, we also like to talk about our F words, but don't worry, they're the nice ones. They're fast, flexible, and friendly. But when we talk about sort of the P in CPQ, we see that as really critical, for the experience, the kind of ROI and margin expansion that our customers are looking for. So there's typically some gray areas, where there's a product like Pricefx that has some capabilities in the C and Q, if you will, but we focus on what we think really differentiates us across that kind of waterfall or P&L elements around, providing transformational improvement. So, be it the optimization or process of improvement, pricing, rebates, discounting, cost allocation, there's really a lot of areas that we can cover where there's value.
Novo CPQ Consulting helps you with all CPQ related questions. For example, we help customers to find the best CPQ solution for their business, and we help customers analyze their current business process to determine if and where CPQ can help. Here it's important to point out that we are 100% independent and always look out for our customers first. This means for us also that we don't get paid by any CPQ vendor for providing them new customers or for any other services. We are focused on our customers and always provide the best available information to them. We also help system integrators to improve their services, and we offer the only CPQ industry subscription that provides monthly CPQ news and trends. We have many other services, so check it out today at novocpq.com. Send me an email to frank.zone@novocpq.com to learn how we can help you with your CPQ questions, and keep us in mind when you look for 100% impartial CPQ advice. Garth, Pricefx is an SAP Gold partner. Tell us what that means and how you work with the SAP team.
Yeah, you're right. We are really my ecosystem team would get mad at me if I didn't mention all of the good stats around that. We are a Gold partner. We're quite proud of that, and we have a great relationship with our colleagues at SAP. In fact, we're the only SAP ISV partner to be certified as an endorsed app. So there's, I think, only around 22 ISVs globally that have that designation. And we'd like to feel like that puts us in some pretty rarefied air, certainly within the space that we participate. So I think we also have more App Center business than any other SAP partner, including the single largest transaction on the App Store. But on the SAP side, we have native integrations with SAP, certified connectors for S/4HANA, for Sales Cloud, for Commerce Cloud. And we have some nice awards on the shelf. We have the SAP Pinnacle Award. We were finalists in 20 and 21 in the Pinnacle category. So we feel like we're really one of their, if not their go-to partner for price management, optimization, and these kinds of price adjacent elements like rebates, claims, incentives, and these other kinds of capabilities. So we do frequently work together with them in a go-to-market perspective, especially for those categories and companies that are looking to make a move into HANA, or that are looking to fill in some of those holes that they have existing within their SAP stack and portfolio, where we can really make a big difference there.
Excellent. But Bill, I have to ask you a question here. Wouldn't many of your customers think of SAP CPQ and Pricefx as competitors? Because, for example, they both show up in the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant report for CPQ.
Yeah, customers may think that. Certainly we don't. And as Garth just explained, SAP doesn't look at it as a competitive situation. Pricefx offers a very robust set of capabilities around pricing analytics, pricing analysis, profit analysis. And as we know, SAP CPQ, and if you read the latest Gartner report, is very high up in the Magic Quadrant as a good general CPQ product that checks a lot of the boxes. But as an example, I was just responding to it's actually a client of ours, but it's one of their divisions, an RFP the other day, and sections of that RFP were just devoted to, we need analytics that are not only post-invoice, post-project close, as far as the profitability on the projects, on and on about the pricing analytics piece of it. And my response was simple. SAP CPQ is not purpose-built to be a robust pricing analytics profit analysis tool. There are other tools out there. And of course, if we got the opportunity, we would bring in Pricefx for that, because you have to look at these business process and the data that these clients have and make that decision, just like Garth mentioned. He was talking about rebates and things that are off invoice. Those things need to be handled by a specific type of application such as Pricefx. And it's not a competitive situation. We know when we're in what should be a Pricefx situation, and we know when we're in an SAP CPQ system situation, and so does Pricefx. So we share leads back and forth.
Excellent. But then let me ask the question: what triggered the discussion of this partnership with Canidium or with Pricefx? How did it start?
Yeah, I can maybe take that quickly. Yeah. Frank. So when like the marketplace products and capabilities that support digital transformation, it really touches on both of our areas of specialization. But when I think of things like Sales Cloud, so whether it's Canidium and the whole host of other participants in the ecosystem, I think about how Pricefx is really a growth platform for this ecosystem. We see Pricefx as a platform. It not only fills the gaps that people are looking for in their SAP portfolio, but it makes these kind of revenue expansion elements possible on multiple planes, right? So some of our customers, they're using SAP and other CRM solutions. Some are using SAP CPQ and other solutions. Some that are using some Pricefx native capabilities. The point is, Pricefx is really kind of at the center of these discussions because of our platform. So every single capability consumes a common data set via our platform manager. So if you look at extending capabilities into your SAP stack, Pricefx is a really powerful, elegant, and efficient way to do that. We deliver optimized negotiation guidance, right, to the CPQ application. We can deliver AI and machine learning driven optimization results into that CPQ environment and more where it's needed in SAP. So given the architecture and the integration options within SAP, you can basically call any of our services within Pricefx and get that power of an optimized price where it's needed. In CPQ, in CRM, in Commerce Cloud, it's bringing in all those elements that are going to move the revenue needle.
Bill, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, so recently, probably about 6 months ago, just as we were launching this partnership, I was talking with one of the global heads of the partner organization at SAP. And this is how he explained when I mentioned that we were doing this partnership with Pricefx. He said, that's wonderful. He said, this is what we see Pricefx as. It fills a white space for SAP because they don't have that solution. And as Garth just pointed out, that solution that does price recommendations, that solution that pulls in data from all different sources and feeds that into CPQ. And that is something that comes up at least 25% of the time when we're engaging with prospects. And so to be able to say, we know of a solution, it's a trusted partner, they have a modular approach. I mean, in other words, you can kind of pick and choose what you need as far as being able to take care of your situation and your needs in requirements in this case. And so, as I said, we don't look at it as a competitive partnership. We look at it as a strengthening of both products because they fill in a gap that happens to exist right now in the SAP CPQ space and in any other vendor's SAP or CPQ space.
And talking about that gap, Garth, what would you say are the top 3 capabilities that Pricefx support that SAP does not support or is not designed to support?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if I've got it in a neat top 3, but one of the most common elements that we're supporting in the SAP stack is this optimized negotiated guidance, as I mentioned, and other sort of AI or machine learning optimized processes. So, right, and we're not just talking about discounting guidance or pricing guidance, but it's optimizing promotions and rebates, and it's connecting with this digital first strategy around ordering portals, right? So at the end of the day, SAP typically, in my mind, I think of it as serving as a system of record, where I like to explain Pricefx as being the system of strategy and action. So we help SAP customers kind of move more at the speed of market, including these digital marketplaces. So again, our SAP customers, you're utilizing a large portion of them are utilizing optimized pricing guidance in some form or fashion, where they're consuming pricing. They could also be utilizing Pricefx for creating and generating customer pricing or special pricing agreements, rebates, whether it's manufacturer rebates or rebates that are from a distributor that are flowing through to an end customer that utilize some kinds of claims and discounting in the chemicals and process or packaging or in those general spaces. Things like formula and index pricing automation is a big deal that we help out with. And I think I already mentioned rebates and accruals with payouts and claims. So anyway, there are really multiple touch points in that SAP area where Pricefx can provide a ton of value in connecting into different elements. Like I said, whether it's commerce, whether it's Sales Cloud, to be able to augment those different capabilities with, I think a lot of intelligence and flexibility within the system in terms of, meeting their business needs. One of the things we see a lot in the marketplace now is with these customers, they come to us and say, right, inflation right now is a big deal. Volatility is a big deal. How do I change my strategies with a high level of frequency? It's that speed and flexibility, like I said, of being more the system of strategy and action to be able to feed those things into a system of record within SAP that really adds a lot of value to our customers.
Excellent. And one thing I wanted to go back on, Bill, was also you recently wrote a blog post about which approach is the right approach for a customer, right? Do they use SAP? Do they use Pricefx? Do they use a hybrid approach? Please tell us more about that, not about the whole blog post, but what your conclusion is and why it did come to that conclusion.
Yeah. Again, and some of the examples I've shown, we look at, do they have a CPQ problem or do they have a CPQ problem where the P is capitalized? Is that where the issue is? So if we have a prospect and they're doing a high volume, they have a simple product. Perhaps they're a process manufacturer. Perhaps they are manufacturing paint or chemicals. It's very hard to justify a full CPQ implementation because they don't really have configuration needs. They tend to not really have complex quoting needs. They may have some data sheets that they need to attach and some sections, but it's not very complex. But they have huge pricing needs because of, as everybody knows, the supply chain volatility these days. So that when I look at that, I say there are people we go in and they have high configuration needs, high quoting needs. They have pricing needs that can be satisfied by the power of SAP CPQ, which is very powerful, especially with some of the connectivity we have to the SAP ERP stack. So we look at that and we say, that is where SAP CPQ plays. We also look at these high transaction, oftentimes B2B and B2C companies, and say, this is where Pricefx plays. And then we also find these clients, such as this Fortune 50 client that I was talking to, where they have that heavy pricing analysis, a lot of times post-invoice, as you said, rebates, royalty payments, ship and debit issues. So those things are where we say, hey, this is where the hybrid approach works. Here's where we can go in as a team and solve all these problems that have come up in these requirements. So,
Excellent. Then let me close with one question to both of you. The same question to both of you is basically when you look at this partnership with each other, right? So what are the biggest benefits to new and existing customers from your point of view? And let's start with you, Bill.
Yeah, as I stated, on new customers, that we can look at the requirements, especially pricing guidance and those things, and have an answer for that client and give them some options. Give them the option of Pricefx, generally tied to the CRM system and other systems and in the client's ecosystem. And then also, the power of SAP CPQ. So we can come in with a full solution to them. For some of our existing clients, and especially existing clients that Canidium has had over the last 13 to 14 years, we have a lot of clients, especially on the commission side, that are high volume, simpler products, not high configuration needs, that could really benefit from that flexibility and the power that Pricefx brings.
Excellent. And then the same question for you, Garth. What are the biggest benefits for new and existing Pricefx customers?
Yeah, sure, Frank. So, just to build on what we were just saying, it's about addressing a specific need. So when I think about Pricefx and using this example, I think it was a building products company that we were talking about, right? It's bringing in capabilities to address specific needs that they have, and putting it all into a single platform, but using the tools that are really purpose built for them around that. So in these cases, right, and you have an environment where you have a high amount of rebates in a lot of companies, managing rebates are essentially where all of your profit and losses. If you're not getting that right, you're not making money for that year. And being able to control those wells, particularly where there's a ship and debit component of it as well, where you have to bring in claims files and true those up to backing up even into of these manufactured product areas, if they're having to look at lumber rates and indexes and seeing the volatility of that. Making sure that you've got your costing and your allocation done properly, and you're not leaving money on the table. People in the last year or two are really quite nervous about a lot of those kinds of supply chain related issues and the pricing implications for that. And then lastly, going up to that last step of optimized pricing guidance, willingness to pay. What's the willingness to pay for different segments and sectors of your business? You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that, but you're executing it all within an application that's getting all of that intelligence and information to the tip of the spear, to your sales rep or to the e-commerce or ordering portal, right? So in the case of where SAP CPQ is the right solution, Pricefx, it's bringing those missing elements around optimization, guidance, contextual decision support, and these kinds of off-invoice or on-invoice pricing conditions that need to be considered. So just summing it up, it's where Pricefx brings those missing pieces of strategy in a very broad context. So you get this, what I like to call 360-degree view of margin and profitability through that CPQ environment.
And that brings us to the end of this episode, right? And hence my very last question is really, what's a good way for interested listeners to get a hold of you in case they have any follow-up questions for you or your team? And let's start with Bill.
Thanks. So thank you for having us on today. The best way to reach us is just go in and use the contact form on our website. It's www.canidium.com. There's a contact form that directly goes to sales and marketing, and you'll get a response very, very quickly.
And what's the best way for interested listener to get a hold of Pricefx, Garth?
Yeah, so probably the easiest thing to do is go out to our website to pricefx.com. And since we're talking about SAP, you can also find Pricefx on the SAP store, formerly known as SAP App Center. And then, of course, you could probably find Pricefx out on your favorite social media like LinkedIn, YouTube, and all of that. So plenty of ways to get a hold of us.
Then thank you both very much for sharing a little bit more about your partnership announcement with me today.
No, it was a pleasure. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Frank.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novoscpq.com. So long, everyone.